Yeah.
How do you relate to the J Street growing movement here in the United States?
Well, J Street, we were one of the sponsoring organizations for the J Street Conference. I was asked by the director of J Street to be one of their speakers. I wasn't there because I was in San Francisco at the time trying to raise money, which is what I'm doing on this trip. But I'm having brunch with Gershon Baskin, the director of J Street, and his family next Sunday in Washington. And I also take a small amount of credit for the fact that Jim Jones, the U.S. National Security Advisor, spoke at the J Street conference. He was the senior U.S. government official who spoke there and said in his speech that J Street would never hold a meeting without a senior U.S. representative from this administration. It was a small struggle to get the administration to follow through on that statement, and I was part of that. So I think J Street is a very important development in the United States. I'm also pleased that the organization Brit Tzedek V'Shalom merged with J Street. I think that was a good step, and I think that they have a very bright future. There are a couple of things that disturb me about J Street, and I'll discuss that with Jeremy and some of the other J Street people. Yeah, I think that their position on Iran is too wishy-washy. I think that they have to have a strong position on the danger of nuclear Iran. And there was a development that just took place, and there's a thing called J Street U, which is the university groups of J Street students, and J Street U in the Bay Area in San Francisco dropped the pro-Israeli from the statement, so that they're J Street pro-peace. And I don't think that's appropriate either. I think that J Street has to have standards, that our slogan is pro-Israeli or pro-Israel, pro-peace. And I think there has to be some kind of standardization behind that slogan. There can be diversity within that. But that's the makeup. That's what J Street is. So I will express that to Jeremy as well.
Yeah, I'm Bob Schutz, and my question is, as long as you bring that up, how would you advise J Street as it relates to the nuclear capability of Israel, as it relates to the Israeli government not acknowledging it, and as it relates to a comprehensive peace in that region?
Yeah. Tough question. There's a kind of paradoxical irony in what may develop with regard to Israel's own nuclear program, because the effect of the Israeli pressure on Iran and on the world to take action against Iran might actually be to force Israel to enter into the NPT, into the Proliferation Treaty, which Israel is exempt from, even though the whole world knows that Israel has at least nuclear capability, if not in fact more than 100 bombs stockpiled. We don't really know. I don't know for sure. I mean, I've heard what different experts have said, what Va'anunu had reported, etc. I have no doubt in my mind that Israel would not be the first party to use a nuclear weapon in the Middle East. I don't think that Israel's nuclear program is an irresponsible or a particularly dangerous threat to world security. On the other hand, any nuclear weapon is a threat to world security. The major danger, I think, in Iran having a nuclear bomb is not in the chance that it will actually use it, but that it will create a nuclear arms race throughout the region. And every country will seek to have a nuclear weapon, and I would like the Middle East to be a zone free of nuclear weapons. So that's the direction I think that we have to head in. And I think that the Israelis are playing this quite intelligently so far in not taking the lead against Iran, because they know that the ricochet might be to force them into NPT. So far that's not happening. I think that there's also quite a great amount of sobriety, being sober, in Israel of the fact that should Israel attack the Iranian nuclear facilities, that we are going to have a rainstorm of rockets falling all over Israel, mostly from Lebanon, and some long-range missiles from Iran as well. So that the price that Israel will have to pay is not the price that Israel paid when we took out the Iraqi nuclear facility when Begin was prime minister. The stakes are much higher, much more dangerous today. That's how I see the situation. I don't know if I answered your question directly. I probably did.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do you see the concern that Saudi Arabia and other countries have about Iran opening a possibility for closer ties with Israel and making this an opportunity to move in that direction?
No.
Okay.
The Saudis let President Obama know quite clearly that any loosening of the current non-relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel is based on Israel paying the price that was put down in the Arab Peace Initiative. If Israel wants to gain access to the rest of the Middle East, diplomatic relations, and normalized relations with the Arab states, there's a price to pay. And the price is written in the Arab Peace Initiative. It's resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's giving back the Golan Heights to Syria. It's resolving this little land dispute with Lebanon. That's the price to pay, and the Saudis are not going to compromise on it. Within the framework of the Gulf Cooperation Council, of which Israel is not a member of, the Gulf states are organizing and are taking actions against Iran. And this is quite effective, and they have their own threat perceptions of a nuclear Iran. They don't want Iran to be nuclear, and that's a common interest between Israel and the Gulf states, but it's not big enough to, at least at this point, build direct cooperation.
Yes, two questions. The first question relates to what you said at the beginning about one of the principles being that you not think that there can't be a negotiation if there is not mutual acceptance of each other. And my question is, does that, what exactly does that mean in today's situation? Does that mean that there needs to be a prerequisite before any negotiation can happen, that the Palestinians say, yes, we accept Israel as a Jewish state? And tied into this question is, what about sort of the power differential that the Jews today, where Israel really has so much more power than the Palestinians? What does that mean in regards to that? So that's my first question. My second question relates more to we talked a little bit about Chase Street, and and I asked that everybody who comes from Israel talk about, what is it that we as Americans, as Israelis living here, as Jews, can do to promote and support efforts in Israel, and also what can we do to combat sort of the internal marginalization and differentiation and polarization that's happening on the Chase Street now? There's this whole issue of, I'm a member of Tikkun. Tikkun got sort of like shafted from the Chase Street that they don't want to have anything to do with Rabbi Lerner, blah, blah, blah. Why is that, and what can we do to kind of work together towards a common goal? So those are my questions.
I don't think that what should happen today is efforts made at getting the parties back to the table. I don't believe that there's room for another open-ended negotiation without a serious mediator at the table who has the ability to put down bridging proposals that everyone understands they have to accept. If the purpose is to get the sides to the table to negotiate and negotiate and negotiate, this is counterproductive and dangerous. It's the best way to lead to another round of violence.